Welcome to Fourth and Frames. I'm Chris Battistow, joined by my co-hosts Rhett Manuel and Drew Scott. Tonight, we will be breaking down our Bussin, Disgussin, and mid players, our panic button players and ring the alarm, and our favorite streamers heading into Week 7. Let's get it popping. Boys, Julio Jones is back. Kyler Murray has been cleared to practice. Mecole Hardman is a Chief, and the Chargers once again have a mid quarterback. Have we finally gone past the twilight zone that was the first 6 weeks of this NFL season, or are we waiting for that Tom Brady unretirement?
Yeah, Tom already said he only get one unretirement, so I think the book is closed on that one. But Julio's back, man. So everything's okay again. Everything's right in the world. We got one of the top 5 receivers of all time. Argue with the wall, argue with the grandma. Back in the NFL, so everything's all right, man.
Chris, I'd love to say we hit the matrix, but we haven't yet because we got a couple people that we need coming back. First off, shout out to the OG shows that we did. We need a Ryan Matthews come back. We need a Joique Bell come back. We need a Zach Zenner come back. And last but not least, we need a Coby Fleener come back for us to truly be in the
matrix. There's one more. There's one more, and I'm a homer.
TG.
It's only right. TG? We need TG. We need Todd Gurley back, man. That's what we need. And I want the old knees too. I want his college knees, like before the injuries.
Before the injuries, you want his baby knees. That's what you want from Todd Gurley. You need those baby ligaments in those knees for him.
That's right.
Such a great career, just cut so short, man. Fantasy stud was Todd Gurley, man. A lot of those guys in that in those names that we just rifled off. But you don't think the NFL would make a special exemption for Tom Brady?
Oh, I think the NFL. I think the NFL absolutely would. Tom just said that he owned, I guess his own self-imposed rule. He said you only get one on retirement, and that's it. So I think that's a Tom rule.
Yeah, the Tom Brady family rule, right?
Yeah. His kids are ready to have him at home.
Yeah, exactly. How was Week 6? Did it treat you guys well? Did you guys have a good week? How was your Scott Fishbowl week? Indulge with me the fantasy football Week 6.
Look, I'll go ahead and start it. Yeah, I'm gonna go ahead and start us off because, man, one thing I've learned to share in my first Scott Fishbowl is that it is tough. Like, God, it's like you can have a really good weekend because of the formatting that you get a win for your matchup. And then average scoring. It feels like every week is just a 1-1 week for me. So I'm teeter-tottering on the 6-6 thing, but I was telling you guys earlier today, and I'm going to just brag on myself right now, is that I've got this 5-1 team that has real championship aspirations right now, thanks to a trade. That's a Josh Allen, Travis Etienne, Austin Eckler, Jonathan Taylor, Zach Moss, AJ Brown, Adam Thielen, bunch of IDP stud guys there. If there's one that's going to get it done this year, it's going to be that one. If not, I might just quit and retire from fantasy football because it's such a good team. God.
That's on tape now, man. We got to hold you to that, Red. We can't lose you, man. That's on tape.
You can't say that type of stuff live.
Yeah. Anything can happen, man. I had an undefeated team last year, made it to the playoffs, got the first round bye. I scored more, maybe 500, 600 more points for than the next guy. Lost in the second round of the playoffs. So, man, you never know what's going to happen, man.
Look, I'm just going to say this right now. Also, to offset the fact of what I just said, I want people to know right now that I'm drunk, really drunk. Not really, but just cut that gator. Red said he's going to retire. And just cut the I'm drunk part and we'll be done. Just so we have an excuse for me to not have to retire from fantasy football because I enjoy it too much.
You're only allowed one unretirement from fantasy football, right?
That's fair. Right? That's fair. Good stuff.
How about you, Drew? How was your weekend?
My Scott Fishbowl team, I'm not gonna quit because I'm not a quitter. But I've almost given up hope on that one, man. Just depending on Deshaun Watson has not went well. And then I invested early in Bijan Robinson, which would be great if Arthur Smith believed in giving his best players the ball more often, then I'd be sitting a lot better than I am. And I took the whole the scoring settings not favoring wide receivers. I took that a little bit too far during the Scott Fishbowl draft, and now I'm paying for that. Like I'm really struggling to find 3 good receivers to start. So Scott Fishbowl is not going well. Everything else though is on the up and up. My home league redraft team, I'm doing really well. My home league dynasty team, it's a 1 quarterback league, so I'm on a mission for Marvin Harrison Jr. That's going really well. I'm tanking my ass off. It's a great success. And then I'm making a surge in our fantasy and frames dynasty league right now. I'm starting to look kind of to buy. I thought I was gonna I approached that draft thinking I was gonna tank in that one as well, because that's typically in the first year of dynasty leagues. That's typically how I like to do it, is throw the first year and then compete in year 2. But my team's starting to surge a little bit, so now I'm kind of having to make a choice. And if I have a chance to win, I'm always going to go for it. So now I'm starting to kind of see if I can get up there with you and Nate and the other Chris, the guys at the top of the standings. I'm see if I can compete with you guys. So and then we got
your lunchbox, baby.
I'm 4-2. My boy Kyle right here in the comments.
Yeah.
In my home league redraft league, he's 5-1. He just handed me an L last week, actually. So, I appreciate him coming in here to rub that in me. It's fair game, So, but everything's well. Everything's good. We're playing fantasy football, so it's tough to really complain.
Yeah, I think the most depressing part about it is that we're a third of the way through the fantasy football season.
Don't say that.
You had the whole offseason, the whole build up and everything. It's like, man, we're week 7, halfway through pretty much the regular season, right?
Yeah,
fantasy regular season. So speaking
playoffs
on that,
usually starts in week 15. So
yeah, you got it, man. Speaking on that, week 7 injury news. It's a long list, fellas. Are you ready?
Jeez.
Yes, bad.
You got Jacksonville and New Orleans tomorrow for the Thursday game. Trevor Lawrence did not practice Monday, but logged 2 limited practices Tuesday and today. So he's looking to play tomorrow with that knee injury. Zay Jones has been ruled out. Same with Juwan Johnson. He was ruled out. Christian McCaffrey injured that oblique. He was a limited participant. Justin Fields with the thumb did not practice, looking to miss some time. He's doubtful for the weekend. Roschon Johnson did not practice with the concussion. He's questionable, but I think he's trending towards playing. David Montgomery's doubtful with the rib injury. He's looking to miss a couple of weeks. Ryan Tannehill, high ankle sprain, doubtful. He was going to miss a few weeks. Jimmy Garoppolo with the back, questionable. Kyron Williams with the ankle injury, he's doubtful. He's going to miss a few weeks. Deebo Samuel with the shoulder, questionable, limited practice. Damian Harris, we saw what happened with Damian Harris there. He's doubtful with the neck injury. Laviska Shenault's doubtful with the ankle injury. Alec Pierce, shoulder, doubtful, did not practice today. Baker Mayfield has the hand contusion. X-rays came back as negative. He's questionable to suit up this weekend. Deshaun Watson, still no practice, questionable with the shoulder injury. Kareem Hunt, he scored the touchdown this past Sunday, did not practice with the thigh injury. He's questionable. Greg Dulcich made the return. He did not practice. He is doubtful. Wan'Dale Robinson with the knee injury, questionable, did not practice. And Devonta Smith with the hamstring injury, did not practice, questionable. You don't want to pay too much attention to the Wednesday practices for the games on Sunday. It's more the Thursday, Friday practices. If players aren't practicing on those days, that's when you tend to get a little bit worried. Most of these guys are probably just didn't practice for veteran rest days, so or just maintenance days or anything like that. So that's the injury report heading into week 7. Some big ones there. Heading in tomorrow, really it's only Zay Jones and Juwan Johnson out. Jamal Williams back at practice for the New Orleans Saints. Is any running back outside of Alvin Kamara touchable in that Saints backfield, Rhett?
Not right now. Really and truly.
AK?
I mean, Kamara has been, since he's returned, he's been a touch monster. He's been the person who's been the figurehead and the guy they try to get the ball to. And what's been a very unfortunate offense outside of 1 week versus New England, but it was New England. So, I mean, Kamara's the guy to own. You hate to say it because there were such high hopes for Olave coming into the season. But, I mean, right now it just feels like if you're not playing Kamara, you're taking a crapshoot on most other guys in that offense. But we'll talk a little bit more about that later, huh?
Yep, you got it, brother. Speaking of that, anyone watching on Twitter or Facebook or any other platform other than YouTube, we cannot see your comments or questions. So if you want to drop a question in the chat for Rhett Drew or myself, head over to YouTube, find the Fantasy in Frames YouTube channel, like the stream, subscribe to the Fantasy in Frames channel, and then hop on and drop a question, and we will answer that question live on the air. But fellas, let's get into it. Our Bussin, Disgussin, and mid players heading into week 7. Drew, Rhett, and myself are going to give you guys a 3 players each, a Bussin, Disgussin, and mid player for the week. A Bussin player is a player that we think is going to outperform their projections for the week. A Disgussin player is a player at the top end of their position that we don't think is going to hit their projections. And a mid player is a player that we like that's, we believe is going to hit their floor, a safe play, a safe flex play heading into week 7. So, Drew, lead us off at the top. Who is your Bussin player heading into the week, brother?
I hope Kyle tuned out because he's got this guy in our home league, and I was kind of hoping to trade for him. So hopefully, I didn't know he was going to be watching. Hopefully, he already turned this off. But the Bussin guy for me is running back Rhamondre Stevenson for the New England Patriots. And look, if you've invested a 3rd round pick in Rhamondre during draft season, there's no doubt you've been disappointed. But if you look at what we know now, the first 5 weeks of the season for the Patriots have been brutal for fantasy running backs. They've had the 3rd toughest schedule based on how defenses have performed at this point in the season. Now, last week, he got one of his first favorable matchups for fantasy running backs on the season, and he was running back 8 on the week. He had easily his highest yards per carry on the year. And now this week he gets another solid matchup for fantasy running back going up against the Buffalo Bills, who have given up the 12th most fantasy points to the position. And as gross as it may feel to call anyone in this Patriots offense a Bussin option, in my mind, Rhamondre is still the best offensive weapon this team has going up against a defense that's been they're a team you want to run against. You hadn't really had much success passing against this defense. So Rhamondre, he's the guy you want in the Patriots backfield. So far, he's accounted for 66% of the running back snaps, 53% of the running back routes. You might have to worry about Zeke vulturing a touchdown if they get on the goal line. But Rhamondre, he's still getting the majority of the opportunities. If this game gets out of hand, I would expect him to get the majority of the passing work. He had a lot more targets than Zeke did last week. And I'll say this too, while this might technically just be a week 7 Bussin pick, and I do expect him to have a good week 7, I think Rhamondre could be one of the better buy low options at the running back position right now due to him being running back 22 on the year and the fact that you did have to invest a 3rd round pick if you wanted to draft him. So most Rhamondre drafters are probably disappointed. And I mentioned already how difficult his schedule's been up to this point. And whenever you look at it, his schedule is really going to soften up. The Patriots have the 3rd easiest schedule for fantasy running backs for the remainder of the year. And so that's somebody, I think you can play him this week, which I don't see any way you don't play him this week with all the injuries and bye weeks and things like that. You're putting him in your lineup, but I think you should be excited for that. And then if you don't have him on your team, I think before this weekend, if you need running backs and if the Rhamondre Stevenson owner in your league is struggling, I think you should go try to grab him on the cheap because this is probably going to be one of the last weeks you can do that. Fantasy Pros Week 7 ECR has Rhamondre as the running back 15. I've got him up at running back 13 for the week, so just ahead of consensus, and I think you should be excited to put him in your lineup this weekend.
You hear that, Kyle? Sell Rhamondre low to Drew, right?
Sell him to me. I need running backs in that league, man.
Yeah. I love the call, though. It's only a matter of time for Rhamondre Stevenson to produce the running back that you drafted him to be. So I dig it. I'm looking forward to the Rhamondre Stevenson game versus Buffalo, and watch out for the weather. If it's windy, if it's a windy day, we know that the New England Patriots have been known to run the ball on windy days against the Bills. So Drew's Bussin pick for week 7 is Rhamondre Stevenson. Rhett, you got another running back for us. Who is it?
Baby, I know we said coming into the season that it was not, we maybe wouldn't be this time, but the time has come. The time is now, to quote the great Johnston. It is Roschon Johnson season against the Las Vegas Raiders this week. Heading into the week, despite the fact that he is in concussion protocol as the running back 18 in Fantasy Pros ECR rankings, which tells you everything you need to know about the potential he has this week, because he's on the injury report and they're saying my man is at least a mid running back 2 this week. So last week we were hurt. We had D'Onta Foreman, and D'Onta Foreman was just sort of okay last week. 16 carries for 65 yards. I mean, had his spots, played decently, but all in all, didn't really blow anybody away. They kind of spread the ball around a little bit. The biggest thing this week that makes this a pro Roschon week is the fact that there is no Justin Fields. There is no Khalil Herbert once again. I mean, if Justin Fields were there, you might say that he might take some of that running upside away. But, I mean, it's Tyler Badgett time this week in Chicago. So we need to see what's going on, because this is just as good a week as Roschon Johnson is going to have all year to prove the fact that he can be a bell cow in this offense. He's playing a Las Vegas Raiders defense that is the 23rd ranked run defense in the NFL and has given up 7 rushing touchdowns so far this season. So they're giving up about 1 a week. So, that also plays into his hands without Justin Fields there. And it's a rushing defense and a defense in general that outside of Max Crosby, they don't have too many guys who are really playing super great ball. There was a lot of hype around Divine Diablo. Hasn't really panned out so far this year. I think he's around a linebacker 50 or something for the season in IDP rankings. So, we saw in week 1 what Roschon Johnson's pass catching upside could be. And with Tyson Badgett starting this week, thank you for that correction, Chris. We have to expect that if things break down, we're going to see a few more checkdowns here and there. So it can really play into Roschon's ability to be a pass catching guy this week. So if there is a week where we're going to see Roschon Johnson happen, it has to be a week where, number 1, a rookie quarterback is making his first career start. Number 2, the guy in front of him is hurt. And number 3, that rookie quarterback is probably going to be expected to check it down quite a bit against a bad defense. So if this is the week it's going to happen, it's going to be this week. Put it on the air, put it on the board. Roschon Johnson is due for a big week this week. Probably, I'm thinking, everything goes well, 15 fantasy points. If you get 15 fantasy points out of Roschon Johnson this week, you're feeling really good about that. So I'm feeling good about locking him up this week.
Roschon Johnson, the Bussin player from the Chicago Bears, a team that's been hurting in the backfield. Quarterback, so Tyson Badgett thrust into the starter role for the Chicago Bears, and now rookie quarterback, rookie running back. I love to see it, man. That's the NFL, baby. That's why we play fantasy football. Grind out the waivers. Get these guys going. Roschon Johnson. I love it, man. I own a lot of Roschon, so I'm excited to finally be able to plug him into my lineup. So our first 2 Bussin players of the week, Rhamondre Stevenson and Roschon Johnson. My Bussin player of the week is Rashid, the last of a dying breed. Shaheed, New Orleans Saints, wide receiver, Fantasy Pros ECR, wide receiver 45 on the week. 2 out of the 6 weeks so far, he's finished as a back-end wide receiver 1. But let's not get it wrong. He is the definitive wide receiver 3 on the New Orleans Saints right now, behind Chris Olave, behind Michael Thomas. That is shown by his snap share on the offense, but he is the epitome of a downfield threat. Guys, his ADOT on the season is 18.4 yards. And this week he draws the Jacksonville Jaguars, which is one of the worst pass defenses in the league. They're coming off 2 games in London, a divisional matchup against the Colts. They've allowed 4 opposing receivers to gain 100 or more receiving yards in a game this season. 9 different players have found the end zone against the Jags. The pass defense of the Jaguars has given up 270 yards passing per game this season, which ranks 31st in the league. Shaheed is looking to draw a good amount of the cornerback Monteric Brown, who is allowing a 75% catch rate on the season. Opposing wide receivers are gaining an average of 14.8 yards against Brown. So with the ADOT of 18.6 yards for Rashid, I'm looking for a big game. I'm looking for him to burn Monteric a lot this game. For the over-under for the receiving yards for Shaheed in this game is 35.5 reception yards. He has hit the over in 4 of his 6 games this season. So I'm expecting big things, especially against the matchup against the Jaguars. Projection time. 5 receptions, 85 yards, and 1.5 touchdowns. That's 17 half-point PPR points and 19.5 full PPR points. That's enough for him to finish as a back-end wide receiver 1 or a mid-wide receiver 1 on the week. So our Bussin players are Rhamondre, Stevenson, Roschon, Johnston, and Rashid, Shaheed. Now, let's get into the opposite side of that. Let's get into the players that we don't think are going to ball out necessarily this week. Drew, hit us with your Disgussin player of the week.
I don't like doing this either. Like this segment is never fun, but somebody has to do it. I love Michael Pittman. I really do. It brings me no joy to put him in the Disgussin category on the week because he's been awesome this year. He's the wide receiver 17 on the season. He's had 11 plus targets in 4 out of 6 weeks. And you might not be able to set somebody that has that kind of volume, and I completely get that. But if you can't set him, I would at least temper your expectations this week and be finding ways throughout your lineup to try to shoot for upside in other spots. Like your flex spots, maybe if you have some safer guys in your flex spots, you have some more upside guys on your bench. It might be the time to put the upside guys in your lineup this week if you're depending on Michael Pittman Jr. This call has everything to do with the matchup. He's going up against the Cleveland Browns defense that's giving up the lowest amount of fantasy points to the wide receiver position of the season, the very lowest. That nobody has been better. They've been in the bottom 4 in terms of fantasy points to the wide receiver position in 4 out of 5 weeks. And I think their worst finish on the week has been the 8th worst. They're just not giving up points to the wide receiver position so far. Now, while I also believe that this matchup will not be as high scoring as their matchup against the Jaguars last week, Jacksonville put up 37 points against the Colts. Minshew ended up having to throw the ball 55 freaking times. And now I could easily see this being a game where it's much more low scoring. It's a grinded out kind of game where Minshew throws less. There are less targets to go around, and he's been targeting Josh Downs more. He's not afraid to dump it off. Jonathan Taylor, Zach Moss, they're going to get a decent amount of targets. Whoever's in the game at running back, and Pittman's still going to get some targets as well. I don't think the pie is going to be as big this week. I think it's going to be a much uglier game than it was against Jacksonville last week in terms of pass attempts. And so whenever you factor in the matchup against Cleveland, how difficult that is, what I believe the game script will be, if you think it's going to be different, then that's where you have to use your gut. But I believe this is going to be an ugly game script for the Indianapolis Colts. Fantasy Pros week 7 ECR has Pittman up at wide receiver 26. I've got him down at wide receiver 30. So he's still a flex play if you need him this week, but that's not that's not what he's given you up to this point, up in this year. You know, you've gotten a lot more out of that than him, than a flex play during the apocalypse. So, you know, I think with all the bye weeks, all the injuries you're dealing with, you're probably gonna have to put him in your lineup. But if you're depending on Michael Pittman Jr., I would definitely be a little bit more strategic in the other players you're plugging into your lineup and shooting for a little bit more upside, because I don't think Pittman's going to give you the upside you've been used to so far this year.
Yep. Great arguments there for, you know, making a decision whether or not you want to start Michael Pittman. But like you said, it's a tough week. It's a tough week for bye. So sitting a guy like Michael Pittman's going to be a tough decision, but proceed with caution. Rhett, hit us with your Disgussin player of week 7.
And I love the weird odds this week because you were all in on Rashid, Shaheed, and I am completely out. Dunzo, finito, finish, Audi 530 on Derek Carr, even if he's playing the Jacksonville Jaguars. Like, oh my God, this has been abysmal to watch. And this is going to be my bias talking as a New Orleans Saints fan, but I am out. Completely out on this offense. Now, I get it. You mentioned all the things that all the positives of playing the Jacksonville Jaguars defense.
Yep.
They've given up the most pass yards in the league this year. On the flip side, they've also tied for the third most interceptions this season in the league with the New Orleans Saints. And they also give up 20.3 fantasy points per game to quarterbacks, which is the second worst in the league. So none of that sounds good, except for the fact that if you dig into the New Orleans Saints offense, we are in for a train wreck. Let's take the ride. So the New Orleans Saints statistically have the 7th worst pass offense in the league in terms of total yardage. They have the 2nd worst completion percentage at 55.9%. They are averaging 5.4 yards per attempt, which somehow is 5th worst in the NFL. They have the 4th worst first down percentage in the pass game at 27.2%. So to quote Drew, the New Orleans Saints offense, not great, Bob. Not great at all. But it's going to be one of those things where we're going to have the stoppable force meeting the movable object this week. And if we're going to be honest, if there is an X factor to me, and it has to be the fact that Derek Carr, number one, is prone to mistakes when he gets under pressure. And number two, Darius Williams is quietly having a pretty good season for the Jacksonville Jaguars with 3 interceptions so far. So that is one of those things where if I'm looking at it, I get that Jacksonville's defense has given up a lot to the pass game. Mm-hmm. But outside of Alvin Kamara, there is nothing I can really trust about this New Orleans Saints offense right now, and that is definitely including Derek Carr.
Yep. I mean, I don't love it, but I like it. I like what you got to say there with a lot of that stuff on the back end of the Jacksonville Jaguars. Hello, Albert. Welcome to the show. Thank you for tuning in. So far, our discussing players are Michael Pittman and Derek Carr. But for me this week, it's Jared Goff, quarterback for the Detroit Lions. It's been a great start of the season for him. It's been a great story for the Detroit Lions. 11 passing TDs, I believe only the 2 interceptions, a great touchdown to interception ratio for Goff, 1,600 passing yards. For me, it's strictly a discussing start this week for his matchup. He's got the Baltimore Ravens. They lead the league in sacks with 24. Oppo QBs are averaging a QBR of 71.4. That puts Baltimore Ravens in the spot as the 3rd best team defense in that category. 2nd fewest passing yards per game against, on average at 163.2. So the quarterbacks just aren't producing. They are only averaging about 15 fantasy points per game. But fellas, it's a big but. This is where you can't let the numbers just build your narrative when you are researching a certain situation, because maybe, just maybe, the Baltimore Ravens defense is so good because quite possibly they haven't really faced a quarterback outside of Joe Burrow. They've only faced CJ Stroud in his very first game in the NFL, Gardner Minshew, Dorian Thompson-Robinson, Kenny Pickett, Ryan Tannehill for a little bit. and then Malik Willis. So outside of Joe Burrow, those quarterbacks haven't really performed against the Baltimore Ravens defense. So there is a situation where Jared Goff could have a decent day, but I don't see it coming against the Baltimore Ravens defense, who is still a pretty stout team defense. Again, leading the league in sacks. They get after the quarterback. My projection for Jared Goff this week, 180 passing yards, 1 touchdown, and 1 interception. Not a very good outing for the Detroit Lions quarterback. So our discussing players on the week, Drew went with wide receiver Michael Pittman. Rhett went with quarterback Derek Carr versus the Jacksonville Jaguars, and I went with Jared Goff versus the Baltimore Ravens. Now our mid picks of the week, players that we think are safe plays, players that we think that you can be comfortable plugging into your flex. Drew, lead us off, brother.
It's finally happened, fellas. It is happening. Last week was the first time this season that Rashee Rice ran more routes than Sky Moore. That's my mid player this week. And he also ran the same number of routes as Justin Watson as well. So the only wide receiver still running more routes than Rashee Rice is Marquez Valdez-Scantling. And I just don't care about that guy because he's played so many years with Hall of Fame level quarterbacks between Aaron Rodgers and Pat Mahomes and done nothing with it, that I'm much more excited about the rookie that has – I think it's been pretty clear with the opportunities he's been given this year. I think he's the second best pass catching option in this offense behind Travis Kelce. He has the highest yards per route run on the team through 6 weeks. And Andy Reid, he's been drawing up some plays to get him the ball. On the year, he's been the first read on just over 13% of plays, which is behind only Kelce and Kadarius Toney, where with Toney, if you want to get him the ball, you have to literally draw up a play to get him the ball. That's the only way it happens. So this week, they get to play the Los Angeles Chargers, who have given up the most fantasy points to the wide receiver position so far through 6 weeks. Nobody has been worse. They are literally last in that aspect. So the Chargers have also given up the 8th most fantasy points per game to slot receivers on the season. And the Chiefs, they move Rashee Rice around. Through 6 weeks, he's played 64% of snaps in the slot, 36% of snaps out wide, so he's going to get a decent amount of slot snaps against that Chargers defense that have been vulnerable in that area. So the only thing that really worries me, to be honest with you, is that the Chiefs defense has been so good this year that they might be able to keep this from being the shootout that I would hope for it to be. It's kind of annoying. I want the Chiefs defense to be worse because for fantasy purposes, like we want shootouts in matchups like this. Like we've seen some crazy shootouts in Chargers Chiefs games, but the Chiefs defense, like the defense, to me, in my opinion, I think the Chiefs defense has been more impressive than the Chiefs offense, which is something that I would not have expected to say coming into the year, but that's what I've seen so far through 6 weeks. And so that's my main concern is is this really a shootout that I would hope it would be because of the defense? But look, I've got Rice at wide receiver 33 this week. That's compared to Fantasy Pros ECR, they got him wide receiver 39. So I've got him a little bit higher than consensus, and no, I don't care that they just traded back for McCole Hardman. That does not
that doesn't concern you at all, Drew.
No,
Hardman.
Throw that shit out there with MVS and his non-relevancy. All that doesn't matter at all. I think it's Travis Kelce, and if you want another startable option, it's Rashee Rice, and I think that as good as the Chiefs offense has been this year and defense has been this year, there's not too many offenses that are going to be as good as the Chargers to have an opportunity for a shootout. So I think you can fire up Rice this week, especially with all the bye weeks.
Yeah. I wonder if the Chiefs brought back, now hear me out, might be a little bit of a conspiracy theory here, but I wonder if the Chiefs brought back McCole Hardman because Patrick Mahomes needed a 4th for Call of Duty because Travis Kelce's been spending too much time with Taylor Swift. So he needed his man's back. You know what I mean? He needed his 4th guy back. So
never doubt the online teaming narrative, man.
Yeah, exactly. So Rashee Rice, love the pick there for the Kansas City Chiefs. Rhett, hit us with your mid player of the week.
All right, so this one's going to feel a little bit smelly, but I'm okay with it. I'm going to roll with it. I'm going to say Pat Freiermuth versus the Los Angeles Rams. I mean, let's just face it. It's a tough year this year for the Pittsburgh Steelers offense. There's a lot of buys this week. Pat enters the week in ECR as the tight end 19 with a 4.5 fantasy point projection for the week. So, guys, I'm just going to put this out there. If we're talking floors, if Pat Freiermuth can't hit 4.5 points in a week where I expect them to have a negative game script because they're probably going to get blown out by the Rams, we have bigger issues to worry about than whether Rhett Manuel picked Pat Freiermuth as a mid-play for the week in terms of the Pittsburgh Steelers. But when he's played this year and he hasn't been healthy, he does have 2 touchdowns in the 4 games that he played. And both of those weeks he scored touchdowns. Those were top 10 tight end weeks for him. It could be a get right week this week. Like we said, I'm expecting a negative game script. And to your point about Kenny Pickett not being great and the Baltimore Ravens, Kenny Pickett actually coming off of one of his better games of the year last week where he threw for 225 yards and had a touchdown pass and led his team to a win against the Baltimore Ravens. So is Kenny Pickett happening? Probably not, but he's coming off of a good game. So maybe there's a little bit of confidence there. So all this, we're looking at a Los Angeles Rams team that has been pretty stout against the tight ends this year in fantasy football. 4 catches for 37 yards per game this year against tight ends. Haven't given up a lot of points to the position, but they are also one of the 5 worst rated defenses in the league this year. So, I mean, it's not a great defense, but they've had some success against the tight end position. And this is, as we've talked about, this is a tough week to forecast. This is a tough week to find those positive matchups. But if there's going to be a week where the dam breaks and Pat Freiermuth has a week, it has to be this week against Los Angeles. Because, yes, the Pittsburgh Steelers aren't good. Yes, we all know Matt Canada stinks. I lived the year with him as LSU's offensive coordinator. I know exactly what that looks like. It isn't fun. But with that negative game script, we have to see an increase of targets being likely for Pat Freiermuth. Targets are king.
Fat Freiermuth.
That man's a little chubby.
Yeah, timestamp that one too. But with a likely increase of targets, it just has to be a week where Freiermuth hits his floor. So I'm going to call Pat Freiermuth probably the most mid play of all time this week. So let's go with it.
Let's
go. No, I like it for real. As the resident Ram fan, I'll just tell you that the Rams secondary has been much better than expected coming into the year, but they've given up the 3rd most points on the season to the tight end position. So if there's somewhere you want to attack the Rams defense, it is the tight end position. And the, Fat Freiermuth, he's a solid bet whenever it comes to Pittsburgh. So if you want to go at the Rams, you want to go at the tight end position, and the Steelers got a good one. So I like that bet. I like that call a lot.
Yeah, I need to make a Fat Freiermuth t-shirt now. Just like a big old Pat Freiermuth.
Gotta have like the Homer Simpson beer gut hanging out.
Yeah, just a short jersey, the Zeke jersey. Look, the Fat Freiermuth. I love it.
Look, Jorge, I'm not saying that you need to follow through on these ideas, but I've got 2 in 2 weeks for you so far. Number 1 being last week's being Sam Howell atheist, and number 2, Fat Freiermuth. I mean, you've got a merchandising gold mine just sitting in your hand right now, Jorge Edwards. Make it happen.
I love it. So our mid players of the week so far are Rashee Rice and Pat Freiermuth. My pick is Josh Palmer, wide receiver for the Los Angeles Chargers, the new wide receiver too, now that Mike Williams is out for the season, unfortunately, with a devastating knee injury. Last week, he had a season high in snap share, targets, and yardage, was the leader in routes run and end zone targets for the Chargers versus the Cowboys, ran 20 more routes than rookie first-round pick Quentin, Johnston, but we've seen him have up and down games this year so far. Week 1, he scored 0.4 fantasy points. And then week 3, he had a decent game. He scored 10.6 fantasy points. But over the last 3 games, Joshua Palmer has 22 targets. He could have easily had a giant day on Monday, and we could have been talking about Josh Palmer as our Bussin player for this week. He had 3 receptions and a touchdown called back due to penalties in that game. This week, he draws the Kansas City Chiefs, who have been pretty stellar defensively against opposing offenses. Josh Palmer in 4 career games against the Chiefs, 13 receptions, 151 yards, and 3 touchdowns. I think it's fair to say that Josh Palmer shows up against Kansas City. The only time this kid has found pay dirt has been against the Kansas City Chiefs. The kid just shows up. They're expecting it to be a pass-heavy, point-scoring affair. The over-under is set to 50.5 points. As stellar as the Chiefs' defense has been, they've also shown up and played bad in some games against the Bears, Jets, and the Broncos. So we have seen the Kansas City Chiefs defense not show up against opposing offenses. So they're more than capable to shut down opposing offenses, but they're more than capable to let opposing teams just go all out on them. And Josh Palmer will have a lot of opportunity against the Chiefs in a game that everyone is projecting to be a high output scoring this coming weekend. So for me, Josh Palmer, I got a projection of 5 catches, 55 yards, and a touchdown. So Josh Palmer, pretty average week there in terms of wide receiver production. I know we have a question in the chat here. If we'll just pull that up there, Gator, from Chuff My Donk.
Whoa.
Who are you flexing, Christian Watson or Calvin Ridley? And do you think Davante Adams is going to come back and be a stud, Drew?
So it's Calvin Ridley for me as far as who I'm flexing, and as far as Davante Adams coming back to be a stud, Davante Adams never left. He's not the problem. He is a stud. Has been, will be, will continue to be. But the quarterback play is what's in question. But what I will say is the Vegas Raiders have the 9th easiest schedule for fantasy wide receivers for the rest of the way. So I expect Adams to be the alpha in that offense. I don't see that changing. I don't care what Jacoby or Michael Mayer and those guys are doing. That doesn't faze me whatsoever. So I was lower on Davante Adams compared to consensus coming into draft season because of the quarterback situation, but it seems like we're kind of flipping toward the other way now. And so, if anybody is sour on Adams, I'll be looking to buy him. And I think if you already have him, don't sell him. I would hold him. The better days are coming for Davante Adams.
Yep. There you go. Thank you for the question. Great username.
What a name, man. That goes in the Hall of Fame for sure.
So that's our Bussin discussing mid players heading into week 7 for Bussin. Drew went with Rhamondre Stevenson, Rhett went with Roschon Johnson, and I went with Rashid Shaheed. Discussing, Drew went with Michael Pittman, Rhett went with Derek Carr, and I went with Jared Goff. And our mid players of the week, Drew picked Rashee Rice, Rhett went with Pat Freiermuth, and I went with Josh Palmer against the Kansas City Chiefs. We're going to head into our second segment, but before we do, anyone watching on Twitter or Facebook, if you got a question for us, hop over to YouTube and drop it in the chat, and we will answer it live on the show. Anyone watching, we appreciate you taking the time to indulge in this episode of Fourth and Frames. Please like the stream, subscribe to the channel, and hit that notification bell to get notified whenever the Fourth and Frames team drops new content. If you're taking this in podcast form, like and review the podcast, and most importantly, head over to www.fantasyinframes.com where you will find the team's written work, videos. There's rankings on there, IDP stuff, everything you need to succeed and chase those trophies this 2023 fantasy season. But guys, are you ready to ring the alarm on some of these fantasy football players? I'm going to give Drew and Rhett a player, some basic stats, and they're going to let me know, they're going to let you know whether it's time to ring the alarm on these, preseason high-valued players, or are we canceling the alert and hanging on for just a little while longer? Our first player, season output so far, 70 carries, 232 yards, 1 rushing touchdown, 16 receptions, 98 yards receiving, RB30 in points per game with he's averaging about 9 points per game and half-point PPR scoring, RB27 in total fantasy points with 45. Alvin Kamara, who's missed the first 4 games, is already at 46 total fantasy points. But Rhett, are we ringing the alarm or canceling the alert on Tampa Bay running back Rachaad White?
Ding, ding. Ring the alarm. Very simply, here's why. We're looking at a declining workload with Rachaad White. Last week, only had 10 touches total across the board. When in his first 4 games, he ranged anywhere from 17 to 22 touches per game. And as we know in fantasy football, especially with running backs, touches and volume are king. Now, you mentioned he's running back 27 overall for the season. That's bolstered by 2 RB1 weeks, and I get that. But he also has 3 finishes this year, where he's finished above the running back 40 threshold. So in most weeks this season, he has not even been a running back 3 for your teams. He hasn't even been worthy of flex consideration in those situations. Now, he does have the most favorable part of his schedule coming up, but with him being maybe the 3rd or 4th option in that Tampa Bay offense, is he going to be a guy to take advantage of this upcoming softer part of their schedule? It's a great question. Can we trust a guy who has a 3.6 yards per carry average for the season? Once again, not sure. The declining touches, the poor efficiency when he's had those touches, until he proves he can produce on a consistent basis, even with this soft part of the schedule coming up where things are getting more favorable for his matchup, after ring the alarm until we see otherwise.
Yeah, and I somewhat agree with that, ringing the alarm on Rachaad White for rest of the season. He has faced the 3 top defenses against running backs in Philadelphia, New Orleans, and Detroit already in weeks 3, 4, and this past week in 6. So his matchups haven't been that great, but he is seeing a good amount of the snaps. He's seeing a greater than 70% snap share. So Drew
raised his hand.
I want to be a good student. I'll just say this. So far through 6 weeks, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, now that we know what we know, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers running backs have had the 2nd worst schedule for points given up to the running back position. It's been brutal for Rachaad White. Going forward from week 7 forward, they have the 9th easiest. So again, if you believe this is more of a do you believe in Rachaad White the player or not? Because if you do, I think he's somebody you should buy. If you don't, then wait for him to have maybe 1 or 2 good games here as the schedule softens up, and then try to sell him. But I think he's a very interesting case study because the schedule has been brutal to start the year, very similar to Rhamondre that we talked about earlier.
So he's right on that cusp.
Yep.
And I think that's where I was with that, was the fact that I wasn't really buying much into Rachaad White to begin the season. So really, it's almost confirming something where I wasn't that high on him. So, like I said, there is that soft part of the schedule coming up. Drew mentions the 9th easiest schedule the rest of the season. There's opportunity there. Absolutely. So I'm never rooting for any of these guys to be proven wrong, even if it proves my take wrong in that situation. So, with Rachaad White, let's see what happens. But for me right now, I can't buy in. It's not something I feel good about.
That's fair. All right, Drew, your turn. I got a wide receiver, 26 receptions, 363 yards, 2 touchdowns, wide receiver 31 in fantasy points per game with 10.4, wide receiver 25 in total fantasy points and 62.3. Only 7 total points separating wide receiver 25 and wide receiver 15. Now, this was a guy who preseason had an ADP of probably a top 15 at his position, top 20 wide receiver, and that is Calvin Ridley of the Jacksonville Jaguars. Drew, are you ringing the alarm or are you canceling the alert?
I don't want to cop out, but I'm kind of somewhere in the middle. Like I don't want to ring the alarm, but I think if I had to choose one, I'm going to cancel the alert. I'm a little worried in the sense of it's looking like Calvin Ridley won't be returning that wide receiver 16 ADP that he held during draft season. But I'm canceling the alert because I do believe that there are still better days ahead for Calvin Ridley. He still has the highest average depth of target among pass catchers on the Jaguars, and he's still tied with Zay Jones for the most end zone targets on the team. And he's also been the first read on a whopping 1 less play than Christian Kirk. Like it's been those 2 guys in this offense in terms of where the first read is going. Now, it probably shouldn't be too surprising that the wide receiver Trevor Lawrence has had some chemistry with, has been the more consistent player to start the year. But I still believe that Calvin Ridley is the most talented receiver on this team. That's just my personal opinion. And as Lawrence and Ridley start to build more chemistry as the year goes on, as this passing offense starts to improve as the season progresses, because the offense as a whole, passing-wise, hasn't really been that great, I'd be happy to have the receiver that's getting the deep targets and he's getting the end zone targets from what I still consider to be an elite quarterback. So the one thing that does worry me is the Jaguars do have the 5th most difficult schedule for fantasy receivers for the rest of the way through the season. And you still have to deal with a bye week as well. So on top of the difficult schedule, they are not past their bye yet. So while I do believe there are better days ahead, I think it will continue to be a weekly thing where 1 week it's Wrigley, the next week it's Kirk, and then you have Zay Jones factoring in where, Trevor Lawrence, he likes Zay Jones, and Zay Jones is a good receiver. Evan Ingram is going to factor in. And that's not even mentioning the incredible season that our boy here on the show, Travis Etienne, us in the preseason, we loved us some Travis Etienne. I'm very proud of us for loving Travis Etienne with how he's been doing. We haven't even talked about that, and how well he's performed to start the year. So I don't think that Calvin Ridley's a must sell. I think he's more of a hold. Yeah. But if he does have another blow up game, now I don't. He's got a matchup against New Orleans this week. Rather, it's Marshawn Lattimore. I can't. The name's is escaping me. The other corner on the other side of Lattimore.
Alante Taylor. Paulson Adebo.
Adebo. Thank you, Adebo. Like, regardless of what side you're lining up against, Lattimore doesn't really move. So, but regardless of what side you're lining up against, it's not an easy matchup against New Orleans. But I believe they have Pittsburgh the week after that. They have led points to the wide receiver position. If Calvin really has a blow-up game and you want to move him right before his bye week, I can't really blame you if you want to do that. But as long as you get proper value, don't move him just to move him. But I think he's more of a hold. I'm not extremely worried about Calvin Ridley, and I think there are better days ahead and things are going to get better as the year goes on.
Yeah, at the very least, he's a flex play. You might not return the value that you got where you drafted him, but he's still averaging 10.4 points per week. So you're plugging them into your flex no matter what, with the hopes and the possibility and the opportunity that he can have that boom week. So cancel the alert for Calvin Ridley. Our last player in the segment, Rhett, 6 receptions, 44 yards on the season. Wide receiver, 119 in fantasy points per game with 1.5. Wide receiver, 129 in total fantasy points with 7.4. Currently outscored by fellow rookie wide receivers Xavier Gibson, who is a special teamer, Tyler Scott, who is on Chicago, and Andre Iosivas, who's averaging a 12% snap share. Rhett, are we ringing the alarm or canceling the alert on rookie wide receiver, first-round pick, Quentin Johnston?
Well, with that kind of introduction, you almost have to ring the alarm. Absolutely.
Yeah, I was about to.
Whoa. No. First off, let's go off and let's just hit our man Quentin Johnston with a gigantic oof for the season so far. And there's a lot of reasons why we could say that. All these numbers are coming from Player Profiler, but he's number 97 in the league in targets. He's number 98 in the league in target share. He's 120th in snap share. He is 97th in route participation. He hasn't established any trust with Justin Herbert. And if there was a window for him to get that opportunity, it was while Austin Eckler was out. And he did nothing with that, in the great words of Willy Wonka. And to make matters worse, the efficiency when he has touched the ball has not been there. Let's dig into that. 0.17 fantasy points per route run. 0.8 fantasy points per target. 0.73 yards per route run. 3.4 yards per target. 7.3 yards per reception. Ladies and gentlemen, it might be too early to call him a bust, but it might not be too early to call him a bust either. Nothing about him has been good so far this season. So I need to ask you the question, how in good conscience can we not ring the alarm on Tyler Johnson?
Yeah, you got to ring the alarm. You got to ring the alarm. You got to, he's droppable. He's going to be a hard candidate to trade in dynasty leagues. You're not going to be able to move him. It's going to be so tricky. If you watch any of the tape on him, most of the time he just can't get separation, and it's just tough to watch, man. It's tough to watch.
Yeah.
And if you're someone that drafted him, he's a tough guy to hold on to.
And he was a guy that we kind of liked, and during all the offseason stuff, we were like, man, what's all the athleticism stuff people are talking about? He's running a 4.5 at 220 pounds. Well, come to find out, he's not using that 4.5 speed at 220 very well so far. So I mean, it's been tough to watch for real.
DBs run 4.5 too, man. That's the problem, right? There's a little bit more to it than just being fast. So our cancel the alert players, Rachaad White, we're kind of on the fence. We're canceling the alert. It's kind of hard to buy into him right now, but if you got him, you're kind of holding on to him. Calvin Ridley, cancel the alert, and Quentin Johnston, like, just if there's an alarm, you can't get to it fast enough to ring that baby. Before we end the show and hand over the keys to the boys over at Shoot the Gap, fellas, quickly, streams of the week. Go ahead, Drew.
Yeah, so for me, you're going to have to watch the injury report because he did hop on it today. He's questionable, but it's Wan'Dale Robinson, the wide receiver for the New York Giants. Whenever you go back to week 4, which was the first week that Wan'Dale played 60+% of snaps, he had at least 6 targets in every game since then. He's been second on the team in terms of percentage of pass plays where he was the first read, and second targets behind only Darren Waller. Now he gets a matchup with Washington that gives up the 3rd most points to the wide receiver position through 3 weeks. The one thing that does concern me with this, along with the injury, is the fact that Wan'Dale plays the majority of his snaps in the slot, and the Washington Commanders actually give up they're pretty low in terms of the percentage of points given up to the slot receiver. Most of the points given up by Washington is against their outside receivers or their outside corners. So I think Wan'Dale's a solid play regardless because of the volume he's getting. But it's not as sure of a play as it would be against other defenses because the defense against the slot receivers is pretty solid for Washington. But considering the bye weeks, injuries, things like that, I think Wan'Dale, if he's healthy, if he plays, I think he is a streamable option this week.
Yep. Love it. For me, it's tight end. Michael Mayer, Las Vegas Raiders, has kind of taken over the tight end 1 role on that team. Routes run, pass game. Michael Mayer, 22. Austin Hooper, 9. 114 receiving yards. 61 after the catch on 7 receptions and 9 targets over the last 2 weeks. Week 7, he's got the Bears, 29th ranked pass defense. Tight ends versus the Bears are averaging 7 receptions, 56 yards. 4th worst against the position. He could be a plug-and-play tight end rest of the season. Rhett, hit us with your streamer.
Curtis Samuel, man, what a season he's having so far. 27 receptions on 31 targets, 3 total touchdowns. Has had 10-plus fantasy points in 4 or 6 games this year. Has gotten red zone targets each of the past 3 weeks. There's some trust with Sam Howell being built there. playing the New York Giants, so we know what the deal with that is. They've been a tough team to really do anything well this season. In terms of streaming and why we're streaming him, only rostered 36% in Yahoo, 29% ESPN, 60% on Sleepers. So he's still gettable if he's on your wire. He's a great flex guy this week and moving forward. I'm just telling you guys to move him before it's too late on Curtis Samuel because he's really having a really solid season.
Yeah, he is. All right, fellas, that's it for us. Let them know where they can find you. Let them know where they can find your work, your Twitter handles, social media. Let them know your social insurance number, address, phone number, birthday, everything you guys got going on. The floor is yours, Rhett.
I am at Rmanuel Sports on Twitter. Call it X, whatever you want to call it. Having a good time when I do get there. But besides that, just teaching and parenting taking up a lot of my time. So I should definitely be doing more tweeting. But, fantasy football is a good time. And, trying to give you guys as many takes as we can over here on a weekly basis as well.
Yes, sir. Drew?
Yeah, you can find me on Twitter. It is Twitter at Drew3MR. If you want to find my rankings, they're over at the Fantasy and Frames website, www.fantasyandframes.com. Catch us on site like www. And I mean, more importantly, go follow Fantasy and Frames on Twitter. Go check out the website. Go check out all the content everybody's putting out. Much more important than my personal social account. But if you want to hash it out, I'm there if you need me.
Yes, sir. Don't forget to check out the Sunday morning live show where the Fantasy and Frames crew takes all of your roster questions, trade questions, everything you need heading into the week. Make sure you check out the mailbag show, the waiver show on Tuesdays. You got Dynasty 365 that's on before us, and the Shoot the Gap IDP show. That's it for us on Fourth and Frames. For Drew, for Rhett, for the producer extraordinaire Gator J, who's in the back, I'm Chris Battistel. That's it for us. Toodles.